Okay, good hot summer day to those who are tuned in, and can't see all the faces, but people are tuned in. So I'll call the meeting to order, a special meeting. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Cabral and Councillor Maude Chapman. That the special meeting of the Council of the Township of Springwater of July 8, 2020 come to order at 4:02 p.m. All those in favor? It's carried. Okay. So we're meeting here due to COVID. Council has taken the steps to limit in-person meetings. So some members of council and other participants are attending the meeting electronically, and the meeting is being live streamed. The administration center is closed to the public for now. Residents are provided with the options to watch or listen to this meeting. They can watch it live on the township website at www.springwater.ca. They can listen to the meeting from a telephone or cellular device by calling 647-558-0588 and using the meeting ID 831-5161-1460 with the pound sign. And this option is available during the duration of the meeting, and for those who are unable to watch the live stream are able to review the meeting at their convenience by watching the video on the Township's YouTube channel. Before we start, are there any disclosure of pecuniary interests? All right, I don't see any. So we're pleased here to have two presentations. The first one is from the Severn Sound Environmental Association. The presentation is by Melissa Carruthers, Risk Management Official and Risk Management Inspector. And she will be joined, I understand, by Lex McPhail, Michelle Houdouin, Alicia Chiandet, and Judy Limoges. So hope you're all there and welcome. And I'll turn it over to start the presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. So thank you to your worship, members of council and staff, for inviting the Severn Sound Environmental Association, also known as the SSEA, to present who we are, our history, and the services to the Township of Springwater. Thank you to Mayor Allen for my introduction. So yes, I am the Risk Management Official and Inspector with the SSEA, and I'll be guiding you through today's presentation on behalf of Julie Cayley, who is the Executive Director of the Severn Sound Environmental Association.
Just before you start, as we go through the presentation, if I see hands up for a question, do you want questions then, or do you want to finish the presentation and have questions after the end?
Through you, your worship, whichever is easier. So I'm happy to take questions along the way if that's easier, or hold them to the end. But it's kind of personal preference.
Well, if we leave it to the end, then they usually forget half the questions. So I'll look for hands, and then can you see me if I put up my hand?
No, actually, I cannot see.
Okay, well then I'll speak out to say question, and then we'll pause for the question, okay?
Perfect, that works for me.
Thanks, Melissa. Go ahead.
Okay, so moving on to slide 2, so Severn Sound since 1987. So before we talk about who the Severn Sound Environmental Association is today, it's important to understand Severn Sound's history. So in 1987, Severn Sound was listed as one of 43 areas of concerns, or AOCs, on the Great Lakes by the International Joint Commission. Severn Sound was listed mainly because of degraded water quality due to nutrient loading, primarily phosphorus, from a variety of sources. To address this and other beneficial use impairments, the Severn Sound Remedial Action Plan was developed and implemented in cooperation with federal and provincial agencies, local municipal governments, and community members. It was a success due to all stakeholders working together, everyone from the agricultural, municipal, and residential communities, as well as federal and provincial agencies. So much so that in 2003, the area was delisted as an area of concern, and which is currently we're only one of 3 on the Canadian side of the Great Lakes. However, there was a condition that monitoring would continue to prevent regression. Severn Sound is considered a model among current and delisted AOCs because of the extraordinary support from local municipalities and the public through the Severn Sound Environmental Association. Moving on to the next slide, Severn Sound Watershed. So a watershed is an area of land that drains to a given water body. In our case, that's Severn Sound. It is based on how surface water flows to land formations and contours and not on jurisdictional boundaries, hence why the line is so wiggly. There are 7 major rivers and their surrounding lands that make up the Severn Sound watershed. Those include the Severn, Wye, Sturgeon, Coldwater and North Rivers, and Copeland and Hog Creeks. The Severn Sound watershed is approximately 1,000 square kilometers in size and is in the transition zone between the Precambrian shield and sedimentary bedrock. This area is a mix of farmland, forest cover, rural and urban areas, and consists of 9 municipalities, primarily in the county of Simcoe, with a small portion in the district municipality of Muskoka. It also has a fluctuating population based on seasonal residents and visitors. Moving on to the next slide, what is the Severn Sound Environmental Association? So who are we today? The SSEA was established in 1997 as a federal, provincial, and municipal partnership to support and oversee the implementation and completion of the Severn Sound Remedial Action Plan, of which the Township of Springwater was a founding member. Today, we operate as a joint municipal service board under the Municipal Act, consisting of 8 municipalities within the Severn Sound watershed, and we continue to work with several provincial and federal government agencies, non-governmental organizations, and other stakeholders to ensure the investment in exceptional water quality and a thriving natural heritage community in the Severn Sound area is maintained. This in turn drives the local economy by enhancing the community lifestyle and providing tourism opportunities. SSEA is also one of the local source protection authorities under the Clean Water Act that operates within your township. And just a little fact, so Severn Sound Environmental Association is one of 2 non-conservation authorities to be given this honor. So moving on to the next slide, Severn Sound cleanup. So during the 10 years prior to the formation of the Severn Sound Environmental Association, the Township of Springwater saw many benefits from the actions of the Severn Sound Remedial Action Plan through various projects such as upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant in Elmville, livestock fencing installations to restrict livestock from entering the Wye River, septic system upgrades to reduce direct inputs into our lake caused by faulty septic systems, and manure storage construction and installation of East Trough clean water diversions. All of these projects have had lasting benefits to the local environment and the Severn Sound watershed by reducing nutrient input to local waterways and ultimately Severn Sound. Moving on to the next slide, Township of Springwater Watersheds. So the pink hatched area on the map shows the portion of the township that falls within the Severn Sound watershed. It covers approximately 20% of the township's entire area and includes the more urban areas of Elmville and Hillsdale. This portion of the township makes up 8% of the total Severn Sound watershed, and the remainder of your township falls within the Nottawasaga Valley watershed. Moving on to the next slide, SSEA sub-watersheds in Springwater Township. So Springwater is connected to its surrounding municipalities and to Severn Sound through numerous headwater streams and rivers, making Springwater a unique and very important part of the Severn Sound watershed. As shown, Councillor Cabral, do you have a question?
I'm just curious to know whether or not we should be viewing the slides on our screen because I just have everybody's faces here. I know you're talking about slides, but I can't really see them in the council chambers. I'm just curious if we are supposed to be viewing them or not, or maybe everybody else can see them except for me.
No, Clerk Ainsworth, please.
Thank you, through you. The intent is to follow along on the agenda. We're unable to share the presentation and view everything. It's easier if everybody just follows along on the agenda.
Yep, thank you very much. That's fine. It's just we've had other presentations where they managed to take over the screen, so that's fine. Thank you.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Okay, so continuing, so the slide that we're on is titled SSEA Sub-Watersheds in Springwater Township. So I'll just start from the beginning of that slide, so we're on the same page here. So Springwater, as I said, it's connected to its surrounding municipalities and Severn Sound through numerous headwater streams and rivers, so making Springwater a unique and very important part of Severn Sound watershed. So as shown by the black directional arrows on the map, the headwaters of 3 Severn Sound rivers are located within the township and include the Wye and Sturgeon rivers and Hog Creek. The Woodland Allenwood Beach sub-watershed also receives surface water originating from Springwater. So the next slide is entitled SSCA Watershed Services. So this slide shows a complete list of the current services the SSCA provides to our member municipalities within the Severn Sound Watershed. And I'll speak more about these as they relate specifically to the Township of Springwater now. So moving on to the next slide is environmental monitoring. So as part of the Severn Sound Remedial Action Plan commitments, the SSCA continues to monitor water quality in the open waters and streams of the Severn Sound Watershed, including those in the Township of Springwater. So a quick overview of what monitoring included is as follows. So in local streams, the SSCA samples the bugs in the sediment, also known as benthic invertebrates, at 13 sites and an additional 3 lake sites on Orr Lake, as they are fantastic indicators of water quality. We have 31 long-term stream temperature sites, as well as an intensive temperature survey that was completed on the Hog Creek. And this gives an indication of what fish species can be expected, since some can only live in cold or cool water systems, and provides justification to strengthen protection on some of these stream areas. There's been over 30 flow stations as part of an intensive base flow survey to identify the portions of streams that flows that are maintained by groundwater or from rain. As part of the partnership with the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks through the Provincial Water Quality Monitoring Network, water quality is monitored at one station on the Wye River, just south of Elmvale, for general water chemistry and concentrations of nutrients and metals, and stream chemistry to support the Orr Lake surveys. So this includes sampling at 5 inflow streams and the outflow of the lake, which is the Wye River. And we also do open water sampling on Orr Lake. So there's 2 long-term stations. So one's done in the summer and one in the winter. And these are monitored for indicators of nutrient enrichment, algae, zooplankton, and general water chemistry. We also do climate monitoring, such as rainfall and air temperatures. It's conducted at locations that are relevant to SSCA's portion of Springwater. And of course, we're always working to engage residents through various citizen science programs, such as Shore Watch, Ice Spotters, and Stream Watch programs, whose volunteers provide additional data and observations using specific protocols. Moving on to the next slide, environmental monitoring stations. So building on the previous slide, this map highlights the locations of any current and past SSCA monitoring stations within the township. So included are monitoring locations for invertebrates, stream temperature, Provincial Water Quality Monitoring Network, stream and lake water quality, groundwater quality through the Ontario Geological Survey. Moving on to the next slide, Orr Lake Water Quality Survey. Orr Lake is one of the inland lakes that are sampled on a 5-year rotation by the Severn Sound Environmental Association. Orr Lake forms the headwaters of the Wye River, which flows to Severn Sound. It was scheduled to be sampled in 2020, but due to COVID-19 pandemic and lab closures, this has been deferred until 2021 in order to be able to sample a full ice-free season, as the spring conditions are extremely important. The conditions report that would summarize sampling results is scheduled for release in 2022. And a reminder that the conditions report, which summarizes results for the entire Orr Lake subwatershed up until 2017, is available on our website. The good news is SSCA has been able to complete some work on Orr Lake in 2020, which that includes our winter sampling, so that was done. And this includes collecting water samples and field data from below the ice. We're also partnering with 2 Georgian College students who are completing projects focusing on a survey of residents on lake conditions and recreational and household water use, as well as a GIS analysis of land use cover in the Orr Lake subwatershed, including a shoreline analysis. And we always continue to support Orr Lake residents through responses to inquiries regarding water quality and fish or wildlife die-offs. So the SSCA has a close working relationship with the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks office in Barrie for water quality complaints, and we also have an expert on blue-green algae on staff. Moving on to the next slide, drinking water source protection. So as mentioned, the SSCA is also a source protection authority as named in Ontario Regulation 28407 under the Clean Water Act, and we operate on a watershed basis. It is worth noting that the SSCA has a very positive working relationship with our neighboring source protection authorities in our source protection region. So those being the NVCA and the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority when it comes to the implementation of this program. As a source protection authority, the main roles that the SSCA plays are we support staff the Local Source Protection Committee, various implementing bodies to fulfill requirements and roles under this program. And we also work to ensure that the local source protection plan and assessment reports are up to date. So mostly this comes into play with new or changing water systems. So for example, if you're to drill a new municipal well or change one of your current systems, so such as Hillsdale, the local source protection authority in that watershed would be involved. Moving on to the next slide, stewardship and invasive species. So a quick overview of our stewardship and invasive species programs is as follows. So we do have the community tree planting. So in the township, more than 4,900 seedlings have been planted on public and private lands since 2007, and this is done at no cost to the landowner. It's a great way to get the community involved in their local environment, and it has been a program of the SSCA since early in our Remedial Action Plan days. There's also the tree seedling distribution program, with more than 4,000 seedlings being planted by Springwater residents since 2007. Through this program, people purchase and plant trees on their own, and we are also very grateful for the municipal support on implementation, such as promotion, but especially help with tree pickup, sorting, and distribution. So thank you very much to the township and your staff for help with that program. And there's also the invasive species program, which is new to Springwater for 2020. And the benefits include access to technical expertise on invasive species, especially identification, management advice, and training for staff and residents. It gives you access to targeted monitoring on municipal properties to establish management priorities, and participation in a collaborative local approach to tackling invasive species and maximizing opportunities for success, as well as various stewardship projects when funding allows. Through our history with the Remedial Action Plan and various programs since, we have a wealth of implementation experience, and we're always looking for funding opportunities that will allow us to deliver programs across the watershed and implement site-specific habitat rehabilitation projects. Moving on to the next slide, future partnership success. As you can see from the list of the great work that the SSCA is continuing to do, so key highlights, as previously mentioned, are the Ore Lake sampling and reporting, various monitoring programs, invasive species, stewardship projects such as tree planting and tree distribution, and the drinking water source protection program. So, although 2020 has been an odd year due to the pandemic situation, and we have been forced to modify various programs because of safety concerns or due to outside factors such as lab closures, we stress that these projects are not going away. They're just on pause for the time being. We are excited about how we have adapted and look forward to moving ahead in the years to come as we work to complete the goals and actions laid out in our 2018 to 2023 strategic plan. Moving on to the next slide, the SSCA team. So each member of the SSCA team provides expertise and unique qualities that make us a skilled team of environmental professionals. Our current staff complement includes 6 full-time, 2 contract, and 1 part-time position. And actually just today, 4 seasonal staff with funding provided through the Federal Canada Summer Jobs Student Program started with us today. And they'll be assisting with delivery of education and outreach, citizen science, and invasive species programs. Moving on to the next slide, SSCA involvement in the Protocols and Services Agreement. So to ensure there is no duplication of services between the SSCA and MVCA, the Protocol and Service Agreement was created in 2016 between the Township of Springwater, MVCA, and SSCA. We look forward to continue to deliver the services that I've spoken about today, fulfilling our responsibilities under this agreement, and we invite the Township to reach out to discuss any other services that they might need. And moving on to the next slide, thank you. So to learn more about what the SSCA does, please visit the Severance and Watershed at www.severnsound.ca. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And for any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to Julie Cayley, Executive Director. And in closing, the north part of the Township of Springwater is important to local environmental health as well as that of the overall SSCA area. As we continue to provide services, we are dedicated to honoring your critical success factor statement that preserving the natural environment is essential for maintaining community sustainability. So thank you, and I welcome any further questions at this time.
Thank you very much for the presentation. So I'll turn it to Council. Questions, comments? I'm not seeing hands. I'll ask a question with respect to the invasive species. If I remember correctly, at budget time, that was a sort of an optional add-on service that I'm not sure whether we subscribe to or not. Can you update us on what's involved with respect to that, please, Melissa?
Thank you, through your worship. So for this question, I'm going to pass it over to Michelle Hudlin. So she's much more educated on this project than I am. So passing it to Michelle, please.
Thank you. Yes, Your Worship. This program has morphed over the past few years. It started out as a pilot project with just a couple of our municipalities, and it has expanded over the past few years. So initially, it was a program that was an opt-in or opt-out project. This is the first year, 2020 is the first year that is part of the core SSEA services. So all the 8 municipalities are now participating.
Can you just give us a quick and dirty on what you're focusing on in invasive species this year in 2020?
Sure. Yeah, it's our work plan has changed significantly due to the COVID-19 pandemic, as it has for a lot of people, I think. But we're definitely looking forward to bolstering our invasive species information and our presence in this SSEA portion of the Township of Springwater. To date, we only have a few sort of incidental observations of invasive species. So we will be looking, if and when we can do some field work, we'll be going out and actually documenting invasive species occurrences and mapping them specifically on municipal properties in particular. But we're also assisting residents with identification of invasive species. Right now that's being done virtually, so they will send us photographs and additional information, and we can help to confirm the identification. We're also focusing a lot of our work at this point on doing things virtually, so it'll be virtual training sessions, doing some remote sensing to look at things maybe like Google Street View to document species when we can't get out there. We're also planning future invasive species management activities, which will be informed by the sighting information that we get. And there's significant communications duties that we'll be doing this year. And again, that's going to be virtual means. So we'll be developing some social media posts. We're working on a video series right now for gypsy moth in particular, because that's one species that we're getting a lot of inquiries about in the watershed in general. It's kind of on the increase for this year. And then we'll be doing some additional education and outreach, including discussing prevention and control activities that people can undertake.
Are you getting a lot of questions, comments, complaints about the gypsy moth this year?
Yes, through your worship, we definitely are. At this point, I would say quite a few of them have been in the township of Tiny. The north part of Tiny seems to be particularly hard hit, but we do know there's incidences in our other municipalities as well. So it kind of develops in pockets, and certain areas are more impacted than others. We're definitely getting a lot of people asking questions about what, it sounds like rain, but it's not raining out, and that's actually the frass, the caterpillar poop, when they're up in the trees. It does sound a bit like rain. We're getting questions from people sort of on what they can do and some control methods they can undertake on their own properties. We're also working with partner agencies like the County of Simcoe and talking with our municipalities about various control options and continuing to monitor the population to determine what future management actions might be appropriate.
Okay, other comments? Not seeing any hands. Okay, well, thank you very much for the presentation. Can I have a mover and a seconder to receive this presentation, please? Councillor Ritchie and Deputy Mayor Coughlin, that the educational session provided by Melissa Carruthers and her associates, risk management official, risk management inspector from Severn Sound Environmental Association be received. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you again for the presentation.
Thank you.
Next, we move on to a presentation from the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority. And I believe we have Mr. Doug Hevner, the Chief Administrative Officer, and Cheryl Flanagan, the Director of Corporate Services. And also joining are Byron Wesson, Chris Hibbard, and Councillor Keith White, who's the chair of the board. Welcome, people. And I don't see any faces up there, but I'll turn it over to whomever to start the presentation. You had given us a slide deck, so fire away.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. It's Doug Hevner speaking. Along with Cheryl, Byron, and Chris will be presenting as well. I'm going to start you with slide 2 right now on conservation authorities. There's really 2 drivers that created conservation authorities in Ontario. A lot of people think it all started in '54 with Hurricane Hazel, but it preceded that. It started in the 30s and 40s when agriculturalists and communities wanted to do something about the loss of canopy in the communities they lived in. So there's a real push for tree planting. There was a real zeal to try to protect land and protect water, and it carried on for a number of years. The need for it became readily apparent when Hurricane Hazel hit. In Toronto, they received over 1 foot of rain almost in 48 hours. High winds up to 110 kilometers an hour. It was devastating to the province. Damages were in the multi-million dollars in damages. And that's when the aspect of flood management became a bigger piece of the puzzle for conservation authorities. I'm going to move on to slide 3 right now. What conservation authorities are doing today. I'll break it out into the work that we are working on. We have a corporate services team that runs the administrative aspect and deals with our budget process and delivers the budgets to you as our mission municipal partners. We do planning and regulations, flood management, watershed services and sciences and monitoring, land management operations inclusive of watershed stewardship and restoration projects. We do forestry, and we also do environmental education. As our colleague from SSEA commented, COVID has impacted that. Currently, our educational program is not operating at the NVCA. However, we do look to open a camp for international students, new Canadians camp that we are partnering with Rotary International on, and that will happen this summer as well. I want to move on and talk a little bit about the watershed itself. The watershed is rather unique. The Nottawasaga Watershed starts in the Oak Ridges Moraine and proceeds through a bowl bordered by the escarpment on the west side, in your case, the Oro Highlands up at the top, running down into the Menacing Wetlands, and then those big golden beaches at Wasaga Beach. We're home to 18 municipal partners that work within our area, and it's a large watershed of about 3,700 square kilometers, and has quite a range of topographic situations. You have a large landholding and a tremendously valuable freshwater estuary in Menacing Wetlands. Without that, the flooding that is occurring right now on the Great Lakes would be intensified even more if we weren't able to capture that water within that fen and in that wetland itself. We'll move on to the next slide. That's the Integrated Watershed Management Plan. And I want to speak to this one because we went through a 2-year process where we participated with all 18 municipalities in either council members or staff from those municipalities, as well as the Ministry of Natural Resources, agricultural community groups throughout the Simcoe County area. We dealt with people from Dufferin and Gray as well, and had over 300 stakeholders participate. And this was the real seminal document that we created to provide a 20-year horizon for the watershed. We also used it to build the aspects of how we would proceed through a strategic plan. Our 5-year strategic plan was just accepted this spring by the board of directors. And we are well aware that there are changes potentially coming down the pipe, possibly on planning, possibly on education, some of the core service areas. And our strategic plan is allowing us to morph with that. When changes come, we'll be able to address them. I'm going to move on to slide 6 now. And it's just want to focus on that wonderful aspect of the Menacing Wetland and the Nottawasaga itself. I'm a fisherman, and I'm sure there's many fishermen and fisherwomen in the room. It's certainly, yes, a wonderful feeling to be able to go 35 kilometers up the Nottawasaga River and catch Chinook salmon and steelhead trout. And that's done because all the municipal partners along that water chain system are working together to protect that through stewardship and the restoration of the riparian areas that come down into the river. And it's an important part of what we do. We'll move on to slide 7. Our watershed is home to many different species, mammals, birds, fish, amphibians, reptiles, insects. There's lots of flora and fauna, a real diversity of trees, fungi, and flowers. And you can see the oak canopy that we have, and that was alluded to earlier in tiny, and it's the gypsy moth is moving into the Wasaga Beach area as well. So we continue to monitor that and work with our municipal partners on how we can deal with the invasive species that come into our area. We've worked extensively with Collingwood on Phragmites removal, as well as Simcoe County in Phragmites removal. We do quite a bit of partnering with the NCC in the menacing wetlands to remove the invasive species and to try to introduce the native species so it could possibly outcompete that. I'm going to move on to my next slide, and it's the financial impacts of what the work that we do, how it translates into a, sorry, giving me a little trouble here. How it translates into a cost per person. From what we deliver, you can see on the slide that the cost per resident breakdown. I'm not going to read it out. You can see it on your slide decks. I just think it's important for you to take a look at this and put it into cost dollars and lay that back against your budget as well. And when we have some dialogue later, you may want to ask some questions about that. But I think that it's an important piece to look at, and it's a good descriptor, I believe. I'm going to now pass the slides over to Cheryl, and she's going to take us through corporate governance and our corporate services and governance. So go ahead, Cheryl.
Thank you, Doug. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So corporate services and governance plays a critical role and supportive role to the board of directors and across the organization. So I'm going to go to the next slide. This talks about governance. So we have, as Doug mentioned, we have 18 municipalities within our watershed. Each one of them appoints a member to our board of directors, and it can either be a council member or a private citizen. And corporate services provides administrative support to the board through assistance with the agendas, minutes, meeting organization, and the per diem and mileage payments. We also work with our mission statement and vision and our goals and business plan, as Doug had mentioned. Governance occurs through a few different avenues when it comes to the Conservation Authority. We are different that we are not a services board under the Municipal Act. We are our own organization through the Conservation Authorities Act. We follow that act for all of our policies and procedures, as well as regulations that fall under that act. We also have a administrative bylaws that governs the board of directors, and that includes things like our code of conduct, conflict of interest, election procedures, etc. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next slide. Within corporate services, we have a number of divisions, and I'm going to start with our finance division. The MVCA follows the Public Sector Accounting Board rules and regulations, similarly to what a municipality does. We have a capital and an operational budget, again, very similarly to how a municipality does. We have several internal control and purchasing policies related around our bookkeeping. We have purchase orders. We have an accounting software where we can track who does what and how. And we are also required under the Conservation Authorities Act to have annual audits completed. Currently, we have KPMG LLP as our auditors, and we go out for proposals every 5 years for that. And they come in and they audit our books and then assist with getting an audited financial statement out each year. We also have our asset management plan that falls under our finance department. We have not been updating it publicly as we made an agreement with our board, as some municipalities like Springwater phased in their payments over 5 years. As that is now complete, we are bringing the next updated one to our board in August. We also deal with payroll and our grant expenditure monitoring. So you're going to hear a lot in the next few slides from my colleagues with the other directors about the different projects and grants that we are able to go out and secure. And so when what we do in finance is we make sure that the money's being spent appropriately as per their guidelines and ensure that we come in on budget with those. We also have administration and communications within our corporate services. And while they don't have a separate slide, they are an integral aspect of our organization. So communications especially does all of our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and any of our press releases, etc. So the next slide is human resources. And as I'm sure most of you are aware what human resources does, we deal with recruitment, retention, compensation, benefits, recognition, training, development, health, safety, wellness, employee record keeping, employee-employer relations, performance review and development, as well as we have our corporate culture that booklet that we created, and our customer service strategy. And we do follow policies as created through our employee handbook. And as I'm sure you can imagine, COVID-19 has made our HR people, mainly myself, because I am HR, a little busy, and hopefully we will slow down a bit with that soon. So the next slide is my final slide, and that is in regards to our information management, or IT, as it's popularly known, and GIS, which stands for Geographic Information System. So at the NBCA, we're very lucky to have some very talented staff members within this department, and they've created a wonderful network infrastructure for us with servers, security, computer software, disaster recovery, backup and replication. So what we've done is we actually have our all of our data backed up and replicated off-site, so that if we were to lose our data for any reason, we'd only lose a day or two's worth of data because we'd be able to go back and pull the servers from off-site. So we've got a really good disaster recovery plan in place. And information management, this is another really, really important aspect of the NBCA. We have a gentleman who does all of our programming, and he creates databases and application development for us. A really important one is our planning database. So as we started to grow and things started to get more and more, we realized that the way we were doing things previously wasn't working for us. And we looked into some pre-bought software and what could be done. Most municipalities use something called CityView. We looked into that. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. NBCA just couldn't afford that. So we went to our programmer and our manager and said, you know, what can you do for us? And they've created this wonderful database where we're able to go in and store all of our correspondence, all of our permits, all the applications, everything in one place. So we just look up an address and everything related to that address is there. And so it's made us much, much more efficient. They've also done databases for Camp Tiffin, on our education program, source water protection, our asset management plan, and all of our asset management is done through a database now, again, which is huge. 5 years ago, when we introduced our asset management plan, we had these massive, massive spreadsheets that I printed off to show the board, and they were like 6 feet tall, 4 feet wide, and it was, you know, it was very cumbersome to use a spreadsheet. And so this database has assisted us a lot, and again, made us much more efficient and quicker in what we're doing. And then another very important one is our flood management and gauge database. So they've assisted in creating a database where all of our information goes, so that our flood management team can do much more efficient data analysis. So they also do a lot of other things. They've done online forms and payments, done some employee administration stuff on our intranet, so time cards, pay history, etc. And then we also do data acquisition and management. So we have some open information that has public access, making sure that that is always up and running. We deal with ortho imagery, digitizing, and data manipulation of all these maps. And we also assist with some modeling with our flood and erosion and hazard identification modeling, as well as terrain modeling. And IT is also responsible for all of our communication technology, which includes all of our telephone lines and mobile phones. And then the technology around our GIS applications, the web application, the GPSs that we use, the surveying, and the augmented reality that we have for our education department. That's a lot, and a lot of it's very technical. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. But thank you for listening to my portion. I'm now going to pass this over to Chris Hibbard, our Director of Watershed Management Services.
Oh, thank you. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Cheryl, and good afternoon, Mayor Allen and Council. Thanks for having us in today. Appreciate that. I'm going to talk about watershed planning and regulations, and the intent of that program is to ensure that development is not at risk from natural hazards such as flooding and erosion, and while also trying to ensure the protection and restore, enhance our ecological assets in the watershed. We also complete strategic planning that provides, whether it's guidance through policy documents for the Conservation Authority or watershed planning that would provide guidance to our member municipalities and partners. Our watershed, the MOU with Spring Water certainly identifies NVCA's role in plan review and is outlined in section 4 of that partnership agreement. And this includes providing technical support for natural hazards, surface water, such as stormwater, natural hazards, and groundwater. I could move to the next slide. Ontario Regulation 17206 allows NVCA to regulate development and other activities in areas affected by natural hazards such as floodplains, shoreline, Georgia Bay shoreline, as well as wetlands through a permitting process. In that regards, we've had a pretty busy year in 2019. Overall, we had over 2,600 applications throughout the watershed, and specifically in Springwater, we had over 220 applications, and that includes planning applications, that includes permit applications, non-compliances, environmental assessments, and general inquiries, and as well as pre-consultation. Next slide, please. Ecological and natural heritage systems also play an important role in plan and regulation review. As identified in the partnership agreement, NVCA's ecology staff reviews development applications to ensure they are consistent with provincial, county, and municipal natural heritage policy. The intent is to ensure that natural heritage features and systems are protected from the impact of development. Next slide, please. NVCA provides advice to our member municipalities on stormwater management. And for larger developments, more intensive developments, NVCA reviews stormwater designs to ensure that there are no downstream impacts due to increased runoff or impaired water quality. This is an important component of the work we've done and have been doing it for over 30 years in terms of watershed experience that way. Next slide, please. Watershed flood management is a very important role that we play, and it covers things. Our engineering staff work hand in hand with our planning program and regulation staff to protect people and property from risks posed by flood, erosion, and other natural hazards. Our engineering staff are responsible for natural hazard management, flood and erosion control, ice management, flood forecasting and warning, drought and low water program, as well as stormwater management review. The next slide, please. Another way we're addressing these issues is to updating our floodplain mapping, and that's done through a number of different avenues. One avenue is updating our estimated flood lines, which is a layer or component of our regulation mapping. Another way is through National Disaster Mitigation Program funding and working with in partnership with our municipalities. We currently have a project underway now with the Nottawasaga Beach, but we also have had programs in the past in Township of Essa and Collingwood as well. Next slide, please. One of the components that our engineering staff look after as well is flood messaging. The flood management is a shared responsibility. Ontario and conservation authorities are on the front lines of provincial flood forecasting and warning program. Conservation authorities provide planning support and advice to municipalities to minimize flood impacts and issue flood warnings. In 2019, we've issued 8 messages, and so far in 2020, we've issued 3 messages. And the intent is to monitor our gauges, monitor weather, and provide that important information to our residents and our municipalities of possible flooding or the length of flooding. And we work in hand with our emergency response contacts at our different municipalities. Excuse me. Next slide. In support of the flood forecasting, one of the key components that we look at is watercourse monitoring and snow surveys, as well as stream gauges. Staff carry out in the winter snow surveys to assist with predicting possible stream melt conditions and potential flooding. Along with our stream gauge and weather forecasts, those also play an important role. Stream surveys are also carried out to determine flow conditions, including base flow, and we also monitor low flow conditions as as we can see what we're living through right now with the lack of rain. Our snow survey courses in Springwater include Edenville Conservation Authority. In terms of gauges, stream gauges, we have one on the Nottawasaga River near Edenville. We have one on Willow Creek near Minising. We also have one at Orr Lake. And we have one on Wye River near Elmville. Next slide. Another important program that we have is our watershed science and monitoring. This program works to facilitate effective decision making by advancing our knowledge of the watershed science through monitoring and scientific discovery. This includes surface and groundwater, monitoring drinking water and source water protection, as well as preparation of watershed report cards or health checks. Next slide. Groundwater monitoring is we've operating 19 monitoring wells as part of the Provincial Groundwater Monitoring Network at 10 sites within the watershed. Our groundwater monitoring allows us to track changes in groundwater quality and quantity over time and identify potential contaminant sources and effective remediation strategies. In Springwater, we have 2 provincial groundwater monitoring wells. We have 4, I call them Ontario Geological Survey wells. They're now South and Central monitoring system. And we also have 44 wells, Minising wells. These are very shallow wells to determine fluctuations of water depths in groundwater in Minising itself. Next slide. The watershed monitoring program, I guess this is more surface water, has been assessing stream health since 1996 and is completed outside the Severn Sound environmental area. This program includes a number of activities related to collection, storage, analysis, and reporting data related to watershed health. This includes, and very much the similar listing that the SSCA presentation noted, benthic and vertebrae, water temperature sampling, stormwater sampling, electrofishing, and base flow monitoring or measurements. Other monitoring projects include burn monitoring at Tiffin and Minising Wetland. The Nottawasaga, in that case, has been participating in forest bird monitoring annually and continuously since 2005, with one site consisting of 5 stations within Tiffin. In terms of work within Springwater, we have 3 provincial water quality monitoring stations, 12 benthic stations, 4 fishery stations and 3 temperature stations within spring water. And the next slide is source water protection. It's a very important program at the Conservation Authority. In 2006, Clean Water Act ensures that our communities are able to protect the municipal drinking water supplies from contamination and overuse. The NVCA is a local watershed management organization that acts as a source water protection authority. Also, as part of that, we have 9 of our municipalities that use the Conservation Authority as a risk management officer, including Malmer, Clearview, Shelburne, Essa, New Tecumseh, Innisfil, Agila, Tosserano, Melanchthon, and Mono. The next slide, and at this point, I'm pleased to turn the presentation over to Byron Westin, Director of Conservation Services.
Am I there?
We can hear you.
Can you see me?
I can see you too.
All right, good. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Chris. And good evening to Mayor and Council. Conservation Services is the program that I look after and all those programs within. So I'm going to give a little overview. Basically, land management and operations is looking after our infrastructure, our fleet, enforcement on our properties, etc. When it comes to the land management component, we own and manage 13,000 acres of land across our entire watershed. About 2/3 of that land, or 8,400 acres, falls within Springwater Township. And those lands are within the menacing wetlands. As Doug had noted, this is a world-class wetland. And so basically we have over half of that wetland falling within Springwater that's owned and managed by NVCA. Beyond the protection and conservation of menacing wetlands, we annually see thousands of anglers and hunters, hikers, canoeists that are visiting this wetland for recreational purposes. Without a doubt, this property is the most popular and highly visited of all that we look after. For many years, we've had colleges and universities from across Ontario, some other provinces that have conducted research activities. Trying to identify more of the unique features that are going on in this wetland. So it's a very popular spot for many reasons. Fort Willow, I'm sure you've all heard of that. Culturally significant site that is largely responsible for the geographical boundaries of Canada that we know today in this part of Canada. This area is visited by thousands of people every year as well. And they come there to enjoy passive recreation and to learn a little bit more about Canadian history. We have a festival at Fort Willow. It's been a mainstay for many years. This is planned and delivered by NVCA staff and Springwater staff and the Friends of Fort Willow. This festival annually sees several thousand people, of which 1,100, 1,200 students every year are there alone, making it a very, very colorful and educational opportunity. This year it's going to be canceled, of course, and we look forward to 2021. I think I forgot to say next slide. Are we still on the land management operations, the front slide?
No, I think we're sort of following what you're saying. We're able to pick up the slides. So go ahead. That's good.
Okay, so I'm now at the next slide. It's a number of pictures of green spaces.
Okay.
All right, so I want to talk about Edenville Conservation Area. Obviously, another popular site within Springwater. We call it's access to the bottom of menacing wetlands. And anglers and canoeists, picnickers, whatever, they make high use of this area every year. We've had a long-term lease with Springwater Township for about 20 years now. There's several years to go. And I'd like to think that moving forward, NVCA staff, Springwater staff, we have been speaking, and we'd like to think that we could work closer together on property maintenance, promotion, and upgrades for visitor safety, enjoyment, etc., because we're seeing a lot of activity there. And I think it's going to be a win-win for both us and the municipality. We own and manage several other properties in Springwater. These are properties that were donations largely over the past 10 years from landowners that they just wanted us to look after those lands. They transferred title to us. We don't promote them per se for public use at this time. They're largely used for forest management, for research. We have some exclusive hunting opportunities on those properties. So they total about 250 acres. To help us manage our properties in Springwater, we work with two volunteer groups, Friends of Menacing Wetlands and the Friends of Fort Willow. They provide us with important leadership and programming to enhance the visitor activities. And quite frankly, we couldn't do it without them. We have about 10 volunteers in each group, and they play a very integral component of our lands program. We operate and manage our 8,000 acres of land in Springwater and our additional 5,000 acres across the watershed through an annual $14,000 operations budget. So about $1,000 per 1,000 acres. We pay $10,000 a year to Springwater each year for property taxes, which is about half of our entire tax bill. Could I, next slide, please. It's our Stewardship and Restoration program. And basically, this program works to enhance and restore watershed environmental health through on-the-ground projects. We've worked on many projects over the years in Springwater Township. I wanted just to give a quick snapshot of what we did or accomplished in 2019. We took on 16 stewardship projects across the municipality. They had a total value of, including in kind, just about $97,000. We were able to contribute Healthy Waters grants and other cash to the tune of around $27,000. We had close to 400 volunteers contributing just over 2,000 hours, plus partner group contributions, etc., giving us that value of $66,000. So it's been very active for us and obviously very good for the municipality. Some of the projects that we did undertake last year were we planted and stabilized over 1.2 kilometers of stream, just about planted 3,000 native trees and shrubs by our volunteers. Some of those plants were in menacing wetlands, obviously, to help support species at risk like the endangered wood turtle, etc. We did one groundwater protection program or project, and we I guess we sprayed and monitored 8 acres of Phragmites within menacing wetlands. We'd also worked with the director of operations at Springwater and the road superintendents, and through a partnership with Nature Conservancy Canada, we were able to spray all of the roads that circumnavigate menacing wetlands within Springwater and Clearview Township at no cost to the township. So we're just trying to attack that invasive before it got to menacing wetlands. Next slide, please. So this is going to show, it's called The Work of Many Hands. This is going to show a number of volunteers. Over the past 5 years, we've been working on a project on Willow Creek, starting at George Johnson Road and moving downstream into Menacing. And basically, we're putting in sediment traps. The name of the project is kind of putting the wiggle back into the willow. These traps, they provide cover and attachment habitat for filter feeding bugs, which clean the water. We've had many thousands of volunteers over the years. We've had a lot of students actually from Elmvale District High School come and help on this project. Residents, community groups, corporations, and been quite successful. If we can go to the next slide, you can see the before and after. You can actually see that from George Johnson Road. This is taken right from the bridge, these pictures. The slide before is the top slide, and Willow Creek was straightened, obviously to try to get rid of water faster. This happened back in the 70s. So we had very little diversity. The depths were all the same. The velocity was all the same. And the bottom material was all the same, which is the sediment, which is the infest sediment coming from Little Lake, right through Midhurst, etc. Everybody talks about the sediment in the Willow Creek. So we put in the sediment traps, and the new channel that you can see on the bottom, it now has numerous diverse habitats supporting new depths, velocities, and bottom materials, and much more cover to support a wide variety of bugs and fish and better food source for streamside birds, etc. We were able to double the fish species and increase the benthic water quality score from poor to fair by implementing this sediment trap program. It's ongoing. It's largely volunteer driven, but it's been very, very successful for the willow and of course for menacing. Next slide, please. This is the swamp forest restoration program, a study and a report that was undertaken and reported on in 2013, highlighted 60 years of swamp forest loss. And that, of course, was in menacing, and it was discovered that we have lost 56% of the forest in the entire wetland. So with volunteers, we undertook a restoration project to combat that loss. And again, we're looking at restoring habitat for the wood turtle and the endangered cerulean warbler and species like that. The picture that you see is members of the Berry Scouts planting trees just downstream again from the bridge on George Johnson. Over the past 5 years, we were able to plant more than 26,000 trees and shrubs. And again, it's ongoing and been a very successful program. Next slide, please. Phragmites, I noted those earlier. We, again, working with NCC. We've been working with your road superintendent on the roads, but we were able to hit, I think, about 7 acres of Phragmites within the municipality last year. And it's ongoing when we get funding, usually from NCC or other partners. Next slide, please. This is just a shot of a farmer in Springwater Township. And basically, it's a livestock exclusion project and a tree planting project, protecting Willow Creek and ultimately menacing wetlands from future urban impacts, etc. We've worked with local landowners to complete projects that basically reduce phosphorus loading and improve the creek's ability to assimilate phosphorus. So this fencing livestock, we that's proven. We know that works, and we've worked quite well with many of the farmers in Springwater. Next slide, please. So this should be our forestry program, and we go to the next slide. We all know the importance of planting trees. We know there's a proven link between forest cover and water quality and quantity. Increased watershed development has made tree planting more important than ever. We have a long history of tree planting in our watershed that goes back to the 1920s. The picture on the top left is some tree planters back in the 20s planting the Henry Forest just within Anton Mills. As over the years, organizations and governments changed their direction, and we've ultimately become the only tree planting agency in our watershed doing this work. The other pictures that you'll see there are things that we do to keep our tree planting program viable. We collect heritage seeds within Springwater Township. We've got 2 locations. One is in menacing wetlands where we collect hackberry seeds, and the other is on the old Second Road North, actually, where we collect black cherry seeds. These seeds are then sent to the local nursery where they're propagated and eventually planted as seedlings right across our watershed and beyond. So we've got some good seed in Springwater that's getting spread around. And I'll go to the next slide, please. We also do managed forest tax incentive plans for residents. The one shown here is just an example of one from Springwater. Basically, I'm sure you know what a MIF tip is, but basically we highlight all aspects of the forest of those lands for property owners, and we monitor every few years to ensure the landowner is remaining compliant. But the plans are put in place to obviously to enhance the forest, to potentially generate revenue for the landowner, to create habitat for wildlife, maintain recreational benefits for the landowner, and obviously realize a tax savings for the landowner. So it's quite a popular program. We've undertaken 37 plans this year, not all in Springwater, a couple in Springwater this year, but it's a very popular program. Next slide, please. So our tree planting program, we've been in place since 1964. 1.52 million trees have been planted over the past 10 years on 258 properties. just over 40,000 trees on 12 sites in Springwater over the past 20 years. We nurture and maintain our funding partners. They're very important to us, especially in the forestry program. In 2019, our levy formed 18% of our budget. Our partners created the other 78% of that. So we do not rely on a lot of levy for this program. We have a lot of interested partners, and it works for us. Next slide, please. This is just a quick one on the Emerald Ash Borer, and it is coming to a forest near you, unfortunately. We've seen impact across our entire watershed. We're just now starting to see signs of it in Tiffin, so we know it's moving north, absolutely. Next slide, please. We'll move into our environmental education program. Doug touched a little bit on it. Are we on the slide where it shows the kids planting trees beside the fence?
Yes.
Thank you. We've long delivered our environmental education program out of the Tiffin Center, actually since about the mid-1980s. We've had long-standing partnerships with the Simcoe County School Board and the Simcoe Muskoka Catholic School Board, and we've become a household name within our watershed and beyond. The past 34 years, we've educated close to 500,000 students on the wonders and the importance of our natural world. Very successful program. Many years we've had students, up until about 2 years ago, we've always had the students coming to Tiffin, and the school board changed that up a little bit over the past 2 years, and we now, one class will come to Tiffin once, and then we will come to their school or another area two times. So they'll have 3 times with our educators and work on a project that just gives them a little bit more hands-on and a little bit more take-home. This new method of education that gives the students more buy-in to the programs and more great feedback on the projects that we're working on and the projects that they can take on their own. In Springwater, in 2019, we undertook 16 visits to schools in Springwater, and we hosted 8 schools from Springwater. So we've seen just about 1,867 students in 2019 from Huronia Centennial, Forest Hill, and Minisink Central. Next slide, please. This chart, it's just a general overview of what types of programs that we offer, and each program is adapted to meet preschooler right up to high school. Our educators are, for the most part, all OCTs, or all Ontario certified teachers, and that is highly sought after by the school board, by those teachers coming out here. We'll see anywhere from 60 to 100 students throughout the year, or each day throughout the year, and we now have branched beyond the schoolyards and Tiffin. We're now going to Minisink Wetlands, Nottawasaga Bluffs, and Fort Willow, just to give them more real-life hands-on experiences. Next slide, please. Just a bit of a highlight of some of the programs that we can touch on. One with the young lady with the camera. This is where we have students become nature photographers, and they go out Tiffin or on their properties at their schools, take pictures, they come back, they learn to showcase their work and learn about the organisms, environments that they have photographed. Students learn principles of photography using digital cameras, etc. Very popular program. We have another one that's been delivered and driven by the Minister of Education called the Specialist High School Majors Program. And this is where students in high school come out and they actually work with our scientists in the field doing monitoring, doing forest studies, etc. And it just kind of helps build a bit of a foundation to move them into their next step in their academic pursuits. So it's become they actually get a certificate here from us, and it gives them that extra little kick forward. Then of course we go to the free play area, which is kind of like a big honeycomb built out of cedar rails, which has received a lot of rave reviews around the province, where we have young kindergartens and grade 1 and 2 students go into this area with no electronics, and they just get to be themselves and be creative by working with blocks of wood and getting their hands dirty, etc. And it's kind of getting back to being in nature and minimizing that depreciation of nature that we've all seen happening over the number of years with our students. Next slide, please. Doug talked on the summer camp program. Camp Tiffin been a very popular program. We see about 300 students a year. 2020 was our first year that we were going to address a waiting list that we've had. That's unfortunately not going to happen, so we'll have to look at that next year. We are going to take on our new Canadian Kids program. This is sponsored by the Rotary, where we will see anywhere from 15 to 20 young students that have just come to Canada, to the Barrie surrounding area, from around the world, and they come and they learn how to canoe or light a campfire. A lot of them are actually learning a little bit of English. It's a difficult program for us to take on, but it's become very, very successful, and we have a waiting list for that program as well. I'm going to close with the Rotary. They've been a very significant partner of us. They also sponsor the, we developed a program called Wonderful Wetlands, and it was kind of built around Minising Wetlands, and they've covered us to go out, and we've delivered to Minising Central and Huronia Central to deliver several days at a time to those schools on the values of wetlands, etc. So a very good partnership. That's it for me. I'm going to pass it back over to CAO Doug Hevner. Thank you.
Thanks, Byron. I'm just going to finish up here with a few slides and talk about a few things that we hear, and we're going to call them myths. Like the first myth that I want to talk about is conservation authorities don't allow residents to undertake improvements to their property if it's in a regulated area. We work very closely with our constituents in the area to try to allow them to utilize their land. We're just trying to make them conform to the litigation that's set up by the province of Ontario and the board of directors of the Conservation Authority. And we're trying to make them conform to the Conservation Authorities Act. So I'm going to move on to myth number 2. Conservation authorities are responsible for clearing ice jams, log jams, and other debris from local waterways. We get calls throughout the entire year about, it's your water, it's your river, you've got to get in there and fix it and repair it. Those responsibilities are passed on to the municipality through legislation by the province of Ontario. We're able to work with the landowners where trees that have fallen down are on the land that they own and they maybe have fallen into the river. We can help them and coach them on how to remove that. We have had situations where there's been large erosion fallouts on riverbanks and streams where we've stepped in and been able to work with landowners to try to do some emergency measures work right away. We're experiencing that sort of thing right now on the shoreline of Georgian Bay. And we just wrote an Emergency Measures Act for that we're working with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forests to try to expedite that process. Some of the highest water levels we're facing at this time right now. And just want to talk about common myth number 3. Conservation authorities are just another layer of bureaucracy creating unnecessary red tape. I think if we've lived in the province of Ontario since the change of government from the Liberal government to the Conservative government, there's been a real movement to try to bring business into Ontario and generate wonderful development throughout the province. And I think we've been painted with a bit of a fast brush here in saying that we're creating all this red tape. What we're trying to do is we're trying to provide services to people to ensure, first of all, that they're safe. We don't want flooding along waterways. We want to show you pictures where there's flooding along the waterway, but there's no infrastructure involved or damaged. We don't want lives in peril from that situation whatsoever. And it's tough, but I think that by working together with our partners and by having a board that's committed from 18 individual members that come and represent the different areas, we can have conversations and we can start to figure out how we can work better together. Because that's the solution. The solution is working better together. And we know we're going to face this as we develop service agreements and MOUs going into the 2021 year. We're going to identify those terms that the government's used as core work that we do. I think from the presentation you've seen from my director team, and especially the educational piece. You can see how we are woven right into your community. We're part of the fabric of the municipality of Springwater. Children come here, we get them started, they get interested, they can have lifelong passions and carry them out right in their backyards in Springwater. And I think that's vitally important. And it is those extra programs that we provide that really allow us to do that. So when we have these conversations with CAO Smith and his staff this year and some of council, I hope we can maintain that and keep things going. The last chart I want to talk about in the last slide is what we do versus what SSEA does. It's pretty clear. I'm just going to go down it. In planning and regulations is one of the facts that we provide. We provide flood management. We do watershed science, but only in non-SSEA jurisdictions. We do land management operations, which Byron talked about, and you can see the merit there, like $96,000 worth of work delivered to your community on behalf of the NVCA and our ability to garner partners in funding. And that's something we're proud to do and happy to do each and every year. We're blessed to have Shannon and Fred in our stewardship program that can go out and find dollars, just millions of dollars that they can find each year to put across this whole Simcoe County watershed. And you can see what we've done in Springwater, and we're proud to do that and happy to continue doing that. The stewardship and restoration part, again, only in our SSEA areas that aren't our NDCA areas. Forestry, I think Byron described quite clearly. SSEA has a wonderful forest program. They're introducing people to coming and getting trees and planting them on their own properties. They're creating a volunteer culture. So are we, but we're not crossing paths. We're trying to really be appreciative of what each other does. And we are in communication. Julie and I speak together. Our water resources teams in NDCA and SSEA work really closely together with Lake Simcoe. We're very proud to manage the water that runs into Georgian Bay into Lake Simcoe as well. And our education program, it's all of Springwater. Any schools that wanted to come could come and participate with us, and we'd be willing to go and participate with those school partners. So I hope today's presentation has offered a different view. I know when we get into council and we get looking at dollars and we get looking at money, it's hard. I don't envy your jobs as councillors to try to fit so many dollars into a budget and pull off all the wonderful things you do for your citizens. We face the same challenges ourselves. And I think the only solution for us is to have really good open dialogue. I really thank your worship, Mayor Allen, and council, as well as CEO Smith, for inviting us here today to have this dialogue. I hope it's the first of many more opportunities to speak, and we'll hammer this out and make it work for everyone. So thank you, and I'll anticipate any questions you have for our staff or for SSEA. That'd be great.
Thank you, Doug, and the director team. Very good presentation. So I'll open it up to any questions, comments from council. They're all still there. I'll start off with one. Doug, can you give us an update? The understanding that I have from the board, being on the board, is that the regulations are still in process. Maybe just give an update with respect to the minister and the meetings that you've had, and what's the next steps and the estimated time frame as best that can be estimated at this point.
Okay. Prior to COVID, I would have bet my bottom dollar that by this time, June, July, we would have been seeing regulations. My understanding in conversations with other CAOs and GMs from Conservation Ontario's 36 units across the province, COVID has really put a lot of things on hold, and that is one of the things that's been held up. So we have no hard dates on that whatsoever. I'm going to ask if Chair Keith White could speak about our meetings with the minister. Keith participated in those, and I think he can bring a councillor's slant to that I can't. So Keith, if you could mic up here and just talk a little bit about our meeting that we had with MECP in Toronto and share that with council.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, Keith, thanks.
Good. Okay, thank you very much. No, I think that, as everyone knows, all through 2019, there was a lot of consultations, A lot of conservation authorities and municipalities were invited to present and meet with ministerial staff as well as ministers and deputy ministers, and a lot of information, a lot of facts and figures and perspectives were submitted. And I think that everyone did a great job in bringing that forward right through the fall. And then I believe that with industry requests for further consultations, the January, February, and into March consultations went extremely well. A lot of opportunities for online feedback surveys and that sort of thing. And as CAO Hevner mentioned, that really, I think everyone's been waiting, and everyone would really like to know the regulations so that we can all adapt as that may happen to be. And I think everyone's prepared to do so. We're, as a conservation authority, the board of directors, along with the representatives of the municipalities that are on the board, are looking forward to sitting down and reviewing existing MOUs and discussing new MOUs as required going forward. But without regulations, that's very, very difficult. There's no doubt about it. I think that all members of councils right across the watershed, including your own, realize the other or see the other services that come to the table that may not be those that are mandated as such, but are in many cases funded from other sources than not necessarily the levies, which sort of ties it all together in one big picture. The other thing that came out, I guess over the last month or so, are letters from AMO and also letters from Conservation Ontario to the minister and to the Natural Resources and MEPC as well too, that really we are all very anxious, to be honest, and very much anticipating and looking forward to regulations so that, as I said earlier, we can all sit around the table and work it through together. I mean, conservation authorities are currently legislated to provide certain services, certain regulating procedures, non-compliance, enforcement, and so that must continue as it is. We know we're coming into a budget period this fall, which is going to be impacted due to COVID-19 in many weird and wonderful ways, and again, conservation authorities are in there in the mix with their own budgets as well too. So, to answer, Doug and I really don't have the answers to your question, Mayor Allen. It's a very good question. We're all asking it, and we'd love to have the answers in front of us as soon as possible. So
Okay.
Those would just be my comments in that regard.
Thank you. Thank you. Other questions, comments? Service delivery, Doug. I know you keep track of that through surveys. Have you been busier than normal, or as busy, or not as busy? And maybe touch on service delivery measurements, please.
As the CAO, I have the opportunity to direct that response, if I may, Mayor. I'm going to turn that over to Chris. Chris has just reported on that to our board recently. So, Chris, could you speak to that issue for the Mayor, please?
Thank you, Doug, and through the Mayor. In terms of activity, I'll start off with planning. It's been a little bit quieter as COVID-19 has hit. The municipalities are looking at ways of holding meetings, and we're starting to see more virtual meetings. Applications are starting to move forward, so that pace is starting to pick up. In terms of our permitting, we are as busy as we've ever been. In terms of the numbers, are very consistent. And one area that has greatly increased is our non-compliance. That has got tremendously busy within the last few months. So we're certainly working through that, and our staff is busy out there investigating as well as trying to process permits. Those are the key things that come to mind. I don't know if, Doug, there's something else I should speaking to.
I think that's got it.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor Allen, may I just make a comment in that regard, if that's possible?
Certainly. Welcome.
Thank you very much. No, just I think to the point of the CAO and the director as well too, relative to measurement of permits, timelines, turnaround times, that sort of thing. Twice a year, staff report to the board of directors, and these reports are obviously all public, and municipal representatives are encouraged to bring that information back to their councils and to their staff. It is the only way that we have to measure as far as the number of days that it takes. We have Calc report, the Conservation Authority Liaison Committee from the 90s actually. And this is one of the things through the review of the CAs is really looking for some further measurements so that CAs can be held accountable to the public and also to councils. And so as I say, during the, actually at the last board meeting, the end of June 26th, I believe, that report was made. And again, it's made on a semi-annual basis so that we are able to see what is our percentage. Is it 92% of meeting expectations? Is it 86% of meeting expectations? So I think that may answer a little bit of what your question was relative to maybe how busy we are, but also, you know, how do we measure what we're doing and how are we held accountable? So just a couple of comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other hands, so thank you again very much for the presentation. And it's very informative, good update. So could I have a mover and a seconder to receive this, please? Deputy Mayor Coughlin, Councillor Moore, that the educational session provided by Doug Hefner, Chief Administrative Officer, Cheryl Flanagan, Director of Corporate Services, and the director team from Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority be received. All those in favor? That's carried. Thanks again, and have a great summer. Okay, can I have a mover and a seconder to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council in the special meeting? Councillor Ma and Councillor Cabral, that bylaw 220-051 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council at the special meeting held on July 8, 2020, listed herein, be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? That's carried. And a mover and a seconder to adjourn this special meeting, please. Deputy Mayor Coughlin and Councillor Moore, that the special meeting of the Township of Springwater does now adjourn at 5:30 p.m. to meet again, regular meeting on July 8th, 2020 at 6:30, Council Chambers, Admin Center, Minising. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you again, and we'll see you in an hour.